Hello everybody, it's Tahir here from Oderberg Permaculture Farm. It's a lovely, misty, late spring morning, and I'm standing next to a French drain grey water system that we've just completed for the kitchen of this building behind me. And this video is going to be the first in a series focusing on the principle of produce no waste, and we're going to take a look at how to design and implement such a grey water system, which is very simple and can be used to grow food. Alright, so let's get into it. The first thing when designing a grey water system is to scale it appropriately. So we've got to have a good idea of how much grey water is exiting the building, and that will depend on what the building's function is and how many people in the building are utilizing water within it. So obviously there are a variety of different building sizes, from large accommodation units to small scale homes, tiny homes, and the design has to be appropriate to the water flowing out. So you don't want to make the grey water system too big or too small. In this context, we are going to be building a grey water system for the kitchen of this building, which is a short-term retreat permaculture rental. So there won't be more than 4 people staying in this place at once, and it has a kitchen, and it also has an outdoor shower. So for this design we're not going to include the outdoor shower because it already has a grey water system built in that irrigates these gardens here, which are native plant gardens designed to create shelter and shade and protection from the wind and screening. And so the task at hand is to design a grey water system for the kitchen. The design we are going to be implementing here will be completely appropriate for growing small scale food producing systems, whether it's fruit or vegetables. And so we are going to also just look at the type of grey water that's going to be coming out of this building, because the design has to be appropriate. So kitchen grey water is quite different from ablution grey water or showers and baths, because kitchen grey water tends to be quite dirty. There's a lot of food waste. And so in this kitchen, the first step will be a pre-filter, which will be placed in the sink system. So we'll have 2 plug filters here and here to stop food waste going in. But even then, you're still going to get oils and grease and whatnot. This is a vegetarian kitchen, so we won't have meat waste going through the system, so it's less greasy, but the water's going to still have oils and stuff. So when you're designing a grey water system for a kitchen, you need to bear that in mind, because a bathroom or shower won't have that in the water. And so the designs will be slightly different, and we will take a look at that as we go along in the step-by-step process of designing this grey water system. So grey water systems basically will connect up to the wastewater once it leaves the building. So different buildings will have different wastewater outlets. At some point there's going to be a pipe outlet from the wall either into a sewer or into a septic tank, and that is where you are going to connect your grey water system up to. And this particular grey water system that we are going to be creating is not a grey water system that is designed to filter toxins out of the water, because what we do here and what permaculture systems generally do is they don't utilize toxins in the system. And so all household products, whether they're personal cleaning, they're dishwashing, they for cleaning clothes, are biodegradable in the least, and more effectively they're organic. Okay, they are made from plants, and those plants are hopefully organically grown, and so that it doesn't really matter. You don't need to pre-filter toxins out of the system, because at source the toxins are not going in. And so that makes the design of the grey water system a whole lot easier and simple. And so we don't have to worry about pre-filtering any of the water that comes out of our bathrooms or kitchen or washing machine. It can go straight into grey water systems. And so on our farm we build French drain grey water systems, and we are going to have a look at what a French drain grey water system is as this video progresses. Okay, here we are at the first stage of installation of the kitchen grey water system. And so we've just done the basic earthworks, the simple footprint for the system, and what we have is the waste pipe that comes out of the kitchen basin here. So here it is, it comes out the kitchen. Then we're going to take it down into the ground here, and we've dug a channel, not very deep, but deep enough to bury the pipe properly so that it doesn't get damaged or exposed if people walk on it or something's dropped on it. And then here we're going to make the grease trap. So the water's going to come out of the waste pipe. It's always got to fall. It's always important, especially with kitchen water, kitchen grey water, to have a fall so that the water moves quite quickly, because often the water's got crap in it from the sink if you're not filtering at the sink properly. And you don't want the pipes to be clogged up. So the more of a drop you have, the better, the quicker it's going to move, and the less likely there's going to be any form of blockage on the way down to the grey water system. And then here we're going to have the grease trap. So the water's going to enter here, and it's going to be like a concrete basin that we make with a lid, an inlet and an outlet. And there we'll have a filter to trap any waste that comes through from the kitchen that doesn't get caught in the kitchen sink filter, so that does not enter the actual French drain grey water seepage system that we're going to build where I am standing. So this has got to obviously be sized appropriately in relation to how much water is coming out of the kitchens. But the gravel bed is going to have a very specific design to which we're going to look at as we go along. And then where the soil is piled here at the bottom end, now this gravel bed is absolutely level. You know, it's not dropping down with the slope, it's level, because we want the water to spread and sink. And then here where the pile of soil is that we've dug out, we're actually going to plant a tree. So the water, once it's moved through the French drain, it will feed the tree and irrigate it, because there will be nutrient in the water and the tree will be irrigated, so there will be no other form of irrigation necessary to keep this tree growing healthily and fast. So that's the basic footprint of the system. It's extremely simple. Anyone can do this, and it is 100% sanitary and safe because everything is happening below ground. So as we go along through each step, you will come to understand why that is and how this functions. Okay, so we're now at the next stage of installation of this grey water system. So there's two things happening here that are important. We've started the grease trap here, and I'll explain that in more detail once we've finished the basic structure of it. But the water's going to come in, go through the grease trap, and then into the French drain. Okay, now the French drain, the basic principle is that we start with large rocks, less densely packed at the bottom, and as we go up in the French drain, the rocks get smaller and smaller, and eventually it's stone and gravel. And so any water flowing into the system will rise up through ever tightening air spaces, and it will actually filter itself. So if it ever does come out the top, it's relatively clean. But the idea is that the water will move in. We're going to put a waste pipe through. It'll distribute the water evenly inside the French drain, and then the water will rise up. And then once we finish packing the rock, we're going to wrap it in this Geofabric here, which is a permeable fabric. You can buy it anywhere. It's used a lot in installing drainage pipes and that. They wrap it around the pipes, and the whole idea is that we're going to wrap this whole French drain rock filter structure in the Geofabric to stop roots from the plants that are going to be growing around it invading into the spaces between the rocks and filling them up with root material, and actually even growing into the waste pipe and blocking it up entirely. And any soil that gets carried into the French drain from a runoff perspective or blown in the wind can't get in and block up the system. So we're preventing blockage on two levels by wrapping the French drain rocks in Geofabric, and by creating a pre-filter before the water actually even gets into the French drain from the kitchen, so we don't have it clogging up either with greases and oils and organic matter from the kitchen sink. So this always stays as we pack it, and it doesn't fill up in between the rock pore spaces, and eventually it blocks up completely and becomes useless, and then you have to open the whole thing up and pull everything out and clean all the rocks and reinstall the entire thing. It's happened to me before. This is why I know about this and why I'm taking the following measures that I'm taking. The rocks that we're using to put back in there are actually the rocks that were in the ground when we dug the hole for the French drain. But what we did is, you can see there's a difference here. This is the rock as it came out, and you can see it's covered in mud, which we don't want. So we had to wash the rocks. So we washed the rocks and cleaned off all the mud and soil, so the rocks are clean before they even go into the Geofabric. Alright, so this is the next stage we're busy with now. So it's getting this French drain rock filter system in place, and making sure that we build the grease trap properly. Alright, so we've taken the next step. Basically, we've filled the base of the French drain with the larger stones, so the water, and then we've connected the waste pipe to the grease trap. We've built the grease trap. It's not finished. We've still got to finish plastering it, and we've made a lid. We're going to have a look at that. And we've got the pipe coming out of the wall from the kitchen. It goes underground into the waste trap itself, the grease trap, and then there's a pipe at the base there, and the water runs out. This is a 40mm pipe. It runs out in a perforated pipe. It's got holes drilled in either side of it, so that as the water runs down the pipe, it flows out evenly on either side, doesn't all just go out at the end. Okay, so that's important. And there's a fall, there's a gentle fall in the pipe, so as the water comes out of the grease trap, it flows quite quickly, not too slowly. Otherwise, if it flows too slowly, all the water's just going to flow out of the first few holes, and then the water's distributed evenly in the French drain, and it will seep through the rocks and infiltrate slowly into the ground. If the kitchen's very busy and there's a lot of input through the day, then it'll start to fill up, and then we'll put finer and finer gravel above. This is probably sized well enough to handle a shower as well, not just a kitchen sink, so this is ideal for a small unit, a kitchen and a shower, no problem at all, absorbing the water and infiltrating it into the ground and to irrigate the tree we're going to put here. So this is where we are now, and then our next stage is now to finish packing the French drain and then wrapping it in the geofabric. Alright, so we've now filled the French drain to the point where we're now going to wrap it with the geofabric and tuck it in, and then once that's done, we will then put the next layer of finer rock gravel over the top and edge it. But this is now complete, and there's a large enough filtering area in here, large enough water holding area here to take any inputs from the kitchen, and the geofabric is permeable, so that water will seep out around the edges, which we are going to be planting, and then you will have a tree at the bottom end, as we said before. So yeah, the next stage now is just to wrap this up and then put the gravel on top. Alright, so we've folded up the French drain in the geofabric, and we've tucked it in the sides to make sure that there's nowhere where plant roots can get into it. And now we are ready to put a finer gravel layer on top. So we've been collecting gravel just from the area around us. The soil's quite stony here, so often when we do any form of soil work or terraforming, we end up with lots of stones of different sizes. So we just pile them into different size piles, and then we access them when we need them. And so now we're just going to cover that with the smaller stones, and then we'll take the next step. Alright, so we're at the next stage now. We've basically filled the French drain up over the top of the geofabric, and what we're doing now is we're just creating the edging of the system and sorting out the context around the grey water system, so it's completely stable, it can handle the movement of people, and also heavy rain runoff, because we've got a ridge above us here where there's a lot of water that does come down here in the big storms and that. And yeah, the building we're going to be putting guttering on, the down pipe leading to a tank, so that's not going to be a factor, but until we do that, it is. So yeah, so right now we're just going to make sure that we define the edges of the system really well, so we don't get soil collapsing in on top of the gravel bed from around it. We don't have people walking on it. I mean, they can walk on it, it's totally solid, and and I've made these systems before whereby the actual grey water system is the pathway in the garden, but because we've got incoming water here moving down slope, I don't want soil washing into this particular grey water bed, so I'm going to put a rock edging, and I'm going to make sure that it's permeable enough to let the water through but catch any soil that might build up behind it. It's not going to be a lot of soil because it's well vegetated, the slope above, and then this area will eventually become completely secured by an encircling plant system, a little gill that will be developed to make use of the water in the grey water system, and that will create the stability then, and then it won't really matter. But it's still important to have that edge, that defining line between one system and another, because in permaculture we're always maximizing the use of edge. We make use of edges and we maximize them because on those edges we've got two different environments that overlap, and we've got resources from two different environments to draw on to get plants into production. And we will have on that edge what we would call an ecotone, a unique ecosystem that is not only a sum of the two systems, the grey water system and the soil environment around it, and we have the other edge of the wall, which will generate heat in the day. So we've got three major edges, plus we've got the building. It all combined to create a unique ecotone around this grey water system. We'll get more into that once we get to the planting stage. Okay, so this is the lid for the grease trap we've made. Very, very simple. And we made a wooden frame to the size of the lid, and then we cast the lid out of concrete. So in here is a bit of mesh that we've put in to reinforce it, and we attached the handles to the mesh so we can lift it up and down. And obviously we put it on a plastic base so that it didn't stick to the concrete underneath it. And so we're just letting it dry out and harden before we move it. We don't want it to break up, so we'll leave it here for a few more days when we come in once or twice a day and just throw water on it to slow down the hardening of the concrete. It makes much stronger concrete than just letting it dry quickly. Often it will crack. And yeah, it's probably about 6 centimeters thick. You don't want to make it too thick, otherwise it's heavy. It's got to be light enough for one person to pick up and lift off. Alright, so we've finished the earthworks layer of this grey water system. And one of the design principles in permaculture is pattern to detail. So what we've done now, after we had filled up the French drain, is we defined the pattern of the garden that this grey water system is going to feed. And so your foundational approach in any design before you implement the plant side of it is to create the main frame or the infrastructure that's going to support the plant life that you're going to be putting into this. So this is a neat little compact garden that we're putting in here, and we'll go into the details of that once we've planted this up. But I just wanted to illustrate the pattern language of the space. What it's done is it's created 4 planting zones. We've got an area in the front here with a tree hole, roughly 60 centimeters deep, 50 centimeters wide. We filled it with soil. We put the marker in the middle, which is an implement here. We call it a kufut or a guala. Helps us dig through rocky soils. That's where the tree is going to be, and the water is going to feed the tree. And then either side we've got 2 beds, 2 garden beds, and they have both got different microclimates. The one receives more sun than the other. Once I've planted this up, I'll go into a lot of detail about how everything works together as a whole. And at the back here we've got a level terrace by the back of the building, by the kitchen, where we're going to put gas bottles and things like that. So it needs to be stable. We put it like a river silt. We've got 2 cheeky moles that have come up here. And then we're going to have a cultivated ecosystem making best use of this space. Right, okay, so we're just going to have a quick look inside the grease trap. It's a very, very simple system. It's not really technically a grease trap, more a debris trap. So it's here to catch anything that makes it through the sink filters, any food wastes, solids, and it will catch heavy fats and oils. So all it is just a simple shade cloth bag, the drawstring. That's there we go. Very, very simple. That the water flows into from the inlet pipe in the grease trap, and it flows through the bag and out the pipe at the bottom and into the grey water wetland. And it really just simply slides over the waste pipe like that, and every now and then come and check it once a week. Take the bag, turn it inside out onto the compost heap or worm farm, wash it under a tap and put it back in, and in that way you make sure that the grey water wetland never gets choked with food waste, and then this system should just go on indefinitely. Okay, here we have the finished system, and it has been planted. It was planted a few weeks ago. I decided to film now just to provide a clearer picture of the planting pattern that is specific to this context. So context is everything, and what we've looked at here is a very simple grey water system that will irrigate a small garden. So in this case it's more of an ornamental herb garden, because we've got plenty of food gardens on the farm. And we've selected a tree here, what they call, in Latin it's a Dodonea angustifolia, and it grows into a beautiful tree, not too big and dominating, and it's very hardy. So the function is hardiness. So there may be a time when there's not much water coming out of the grey water system, and so the tree will not die as a result, and it's fast growing. And that sits in a tree pan, an area specifically designed for the ecosystem that will support the tree, and that takes the water from the grey water system. And along the back wall of the grey water system we have a row of comfrey, which is a biomass producer and a soil fertility building plant. So it mines a lot of calcium, potassium, phosphates and a bit of nitrogen, and it grows like a fountain. It's extremely prolific, and we can constantly chop and drop the leaves around the tree. And then we have an osteospermum, which is a local ground cover flowering plant, and that will eventually form a living ground cover in this tree pan, and this system will self-regulate. Then either side of the wetland, which provides excellent access to the garden, because access is really important, we can get in and we can garden from any side. We've got a row of local herbs. So we've got some catmint here, vigorous, hardy, will grow up to about 1/2 meter. And this is also partially aesthetic, partially medicinal. We've got some feverfew, which is a medicinal plant, also very hardy and grows prolifically here, has beautiful flowers. And then we've got a geranium here, which will get quite big, up to also 1/2 meter and very thick. So we'll have a nice hedgerow of herbs. And then against the wall, we've planted 2 climbing plants. We've got a grape, which will go up, or trellis, and it will cover that section of the wall and be productive. And we've got a jasmine, which is a creeping ornamental with vivid flowers in spring that have an awesome fragrance, and the wind direction is generally this way, so it will blow into the house. And then as a ground cover, we've got some Melissa lemon balm. That is a herb ground cover from the mint family, makes excellent teas, is also medicinal, and that will eventually just occupy the space. So the entire system will self-regulate and occupy this niche. And so we've got a few permaculture principles in practice here. We've got pattern to detail, so we've established the pattern of the garden, and now we've gone into the detail. That pattern arranges the detail of the plant systems. Okay, we're making use of edges, so we've got this vertical space, catches a lot of heat in summer but very shady in winter. So what will happen is in winter, when there's no sun, because that's west, that's north, or very little sun, because the sun's quite low on the horizon and the building also provides a lot of shade, the grape will go dormant, the leaves will drop off and expose the wall, and it will be a heat trap. And the jasmine's most likely to grow up onto the top of the wall and run along the top, so it won't have a problem. We've created edges using rocks, that protective edge from erosion, but also an edge environment that holds moisture, will allow niches for insects, radiate heat in winter, and prevent the leaching of water out. And it creates a definition of the system, so it's not something that can just be encroached upon by people not walking in the right direction. We've got the edge of the building providing, and the edge of the wall providing shelter from powerful northwest winds that come in winter. We are utilizing waste, producing no waste. We're taking wastewater and turning it into a garden, and so we are also catching and storing energy, because that wastewater is a resource, and we're storing it in the ground, and we're creating a localized groundwater table here to be productive. And we're integrating, not segregating, so we're making use of all the elements around the system to contribute it, and the little system will then in turn contribute to the greater area, creating a place of beauty, dealing with the issue of what to do with grey water, and providing some resources at very little input. And it will evolve, so it will go through a process of succession, and it will become a mature system here that will in itself become an ecosystem that will attract further elements into it. And so we are also applying self-regulation here, and we are designing systems that will go into self-management, but we're also self-regulating in the sense that we're creating systems that are appropriately sized for context. It's not oversized, it's not too small. There's not going to be any leakage of grey water out of this. We've made sure through the system that there's going to be no smells, because the water's going to be underground. And we've integrated it with the slopes. There's a lot of runoff coming from here that will come up against this contour angle and infiltrate into the wetland. And we are going to integrate it with the roof eventually. We're putting a gutter on, and we'll have a downpipe. And instead of feeding into a big tank, it will feed into a small drinking water tank. And we've created space for it there. And that will overflow into the wetland, providing some fresh water input to just flush it. And so we are integrating this with as many different elements around it, and it's performing as many functions as possible. And we are working with change in the environment. We're evolving a system. So we are making progressive use of the principle of succession. And so this starts out very simply, but the context, the pattern, allows it to evolve into complexity. We've observed and interacted because we've really looked at the context, and we've designed a system that is suited to this particular niche. We've placed it where it is most effective to do the work that it needs to do. And in time, we can link onto it other systems that may function off this, so we can expand the garden in time. And it would have to be hardier, but it provides an anchor point for further evolution. And so we're starting at the doorstep here. We're working with small, slow solutions, and we are making sure that we get the system running properly and effectively and self-regulating before we take the next step on. We've also made use of diversity. There's diversity in the plant in the system. There's a variety of different plants here, different species, and they're performing a variety of different functions. There's a huge diversity of linkages between this grey water system and the rest of the environment around it. Other than the cement and the geofabric and the PVC piping, the system as a whole functions using localized renewable resources that will not toxify the local environment, as well as making use of biodegradable or renewable resources in the building itself. So what we've achieved at the end of the day is the design of a small but scalable ecosystemic grey water garden utilizing kitchen grey water. It could also take water from a washing machine as an addition and a shower. It's utilized local resources, it's very cheap to build, and because we've applied all the permaculture principles into this, it will go on indefinitely. So what we have here at the end of the day really is permaculture in a nutshell.